My dad called me a failure in front of his coworkers. He thought I didn't hear it. He thought I'd just disappear like I always did. But what he didn't know? The house he was bragging in already belonged to me. You're a failure, Elena. When I was a little girl, I used to think that love had to be earned. A perfect report card, a polished speech, a forced smile at Sunday dinners I didn't want to be at. I spent 28 years trying to earn something. That was never mine to begin with. My name is Elena Rivera. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a financial consultant, a homeowner, and technically, I guess I'm successful. But none of that matters when your father sees you as a disappointment. It happened on a Wednesday. I was sitting at my desk in my apartment, sifting through spreadsheets for a client presentation. My coffee had gone cold. My shoulders were tense. But the numbers made sense. Numbers always made sense. People didn't. That's when I saw it. An incoming Zoom call. Dad. Victor Rivera. It wasn't unusual. My father sometimes called me with strange financial questions, though he'd never once asked how I was doing. I clicked join and waited. The screen loaded, but instead of a greeting, I heard voices. Laughter, male voices in the middle of a conversation. And then, I heard him. She's a burden, a mistake. Her biggest success was failing quietly. My heart stopped. The words landed. Sharp, but I wasn't sure at first. Maybe I misheard. I didn't speak. I was muted, but the camera was on. They hadn't noticed me. Another man spoke up, clearly uncomfortable. Isn't she a financial advisor or something? I thought. She ran her own firm? Dad scoffed. That familiar sound that used to make me shrink as a child. Titles mean nothing when you're irrelevant. She plays with spreadsheets and acts like she's changing the world. Meanwhile, she's got no husband, no kids, no legacy. Just a condo, and some delusions. There was chuckling. Not loud, but enough to twist the knife. I reached for the mouse, ready to end the call, but I couldn't move. It was like my muscles locked. My throat burned, and my eyes stung. Was I 12 again? Standing in the corner of the kitchen while my dad congratulated Zach, my half-brother, for passing a math test with a C, while ignoring my state science fair trophy? Was I 17? Sitting alone at my graduation dinner while they raised a toast to family accomplishments, and somehow forgot to mention I was valedictorian? Or maybe I was 23 again, crying silently in the back of the car on the drive home, after Victor told me my startup failure was proof that girls shouldn't try to lead anything. This moment, this Zoom call, it wasn't new, it was just confirmation. He had never believed in me. He had never wanted me. And now he didn't even bother hiding it, because he didn't think I was worth muting for. I finally clicked, leave meeting. Silence flooded my apartment. I stared at the screen, now dark, and felt nothing. Or maybe too much. My lungs felt tight, my hands were shaking, and still, there was that voice in my head. Maybe he's right. Maybe I was just pretending. To be successful. Maybe I was still that little girl begging for scraps of affection in a house that had no space for her. I walked to the kitchen and poured the coffee down the sink. It had turned bitter and cold. Fitting, I thought. Then I did. Something I hadn't done in years. I sat down at the piano, the old upright one I'd bought secondhand when I first moved out. My fingers hesitated over the keys. My father once told me that music was a waste of time, that it would never pay the bills. But I had loved it. I played a single note, then another. Then I cried. Not loud, not messy, not even desperate. Just quiet, exhausted grief. The kind that comes from finally realizing something you've suspected your whole life is true. You were never really part of the family. Not really. Not when your stepmother only spoke to you to pass judgment. Not when your brother mocked your work, then borrowed money from you behind closed doors. Not when your father told his friends that your greatest achievement was failing quietly. I cried for all the years I tried, for all the times I made excuses for him, for all the times I let it go. This was the moment everything broke. I stood up, walked back to my desk, and pulled up a folder on my desktop. Rivera Capital Holdings. I clicked on a document labeled Property, 1816 Elmwood Avenue, owner, Elena Rivera. That was their house, the one they thought they still owned. And that's when it hit me. My father had called me a failure while living under the roof I paid for. He had spent years scorning the very person who saved him from losing everything. I stared at the deed for a long time, then whispered to no one. You're going to learn exactly who you've been talking about, Dad. Because I was done chasing approval. I wasn't just Elena, the daughter. I was the owner, and he had no idea what was coming. There are moments when pain burns through your chest like wildfire, hot, loud, consuming. And then there are moments like this, quiet, heavy, like sinking into cold water and deciding not to fight your way back up. After hearing my father's words on that Zoom call, I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry again. I opened a folder on my laptop labeled Rivera Capital Holdings. The first document inside, property, 1816 Elmwood Avenue, the house they were living in, the house they thought they still owned, but they didn't. I did. 6 years ago, they almost lost that house. The mortgage had slipped so far into default that foreclosure was days away. My stepmother Nancy had called me, voice shaking, tears in the background. My father? He refused to speak to me, too proud to ask for help. But even then, I still wanted to believe I mattered to them. So I didn't just send a check. I created a plan. With help from my financial advisor, Sam Whitaker, I formed an LLC under a name that would never raise suspicion, Rivera Capital. Then I quietly purchased the mortgage from the bank before it was seized. From that point on, every mortgage payment my parents made didn't go to a bank. It went to me, or more accurately, to Rivera Capital. They never read the fine print. They never asked, and I never told them, because part of me still wanted to believe that maybe someday they'd see me. That their love wasn't conditional on my silence or usefulness. But the truth? I'd been covering over 70% of the mortgage out of my own pocket for 6 years. Not once did I hear a thank you. Not once did they ask how I was affording it. They assumed the world owed them a home, and I made sure they had one. Sam had told me back then, "You sure you want to structure it this way? You're giving them a lot of power, without any acknowledgement." And I'd said, "It's not about power. It's about family." How naive I was. Now, staring at the ownership documents, I saw things differently. I wasn't holding them up out of love. I was shielding them from the truth, that their lives were built on the back of someone they didn't believe in. I scrolled to the bottom of the mortgage agreement. There it was, the clause Sam had insisted on including. Should the borrower miss a payment, full ownership may be transferred to Rivera Capital LLC immediately, with no grace period required. At the time, I had laughed when Sam suggested it. What could possibly go wrong? Now I knew exactly what could go wrong. Now I knew exactly how wrong they had gone. I called Sam. He picked up on the second ring. "Jessica? Hey, I didn't expect to hear from you this late." "Hey," I said, voice quiet but steady. "I need to go over the terms for 1816 Elmwood." He paused. "Something happen?" I hesitated. "Let's just say the emotional mortgage default came before the financial one." There was a moment of silence. Then Sam said, "You know, I always told you this was an option, but I never thought you'd actually need it." "Neither did I whispered. He clicked on something on his end. I could hear his keyboard. "Well, here's the good news. It's airtight. If they miss a payment, even by a day, you can exercise the clause. Full ownership, legal, immediate. And if they try to challenge it, they signed everything themselves. There's no loophole. Unless they've got a few $100,000 lying around to buy you out, they have zero leverage." I closed my eyes, not out of relief, not yet, but from the weight of control finally settling on my shoulders. Control I had never wanted, until now. Thanks, Sam. That's all I needed to know for now. As I ended the call, I stared at the digital deed once more. The same property my father once bragged about protecting as a symbol of family legacy was mine, has been mine. He'd been living in my house, trash-talking the very person keeping his roof over his head, And the worst part? I hadn't wanted his praise. I hadn't wanted recognition. I just hadn't wanted to be hated. I just wanted them to care enough not to humiliate me behind my back. I clicked through the payment schedule again. Their next payment was due in 4 days. Sam had said they were dangerously low on funds. If that check bounced, they were done. I sat back in my chair and let the truth wash over me. I had all the power now, not out of vengeance, not even out of ego, but because I had finally realized that I didn't owe them a single thing. My father had always told me I was a failure, but this house, this life, this was the house that failure built, and I was ready to take it back. 3 days. That's how long they had before the mortgage payment was due, and this time I wasn't going to cover for them. Sam called me the next morning, already sounding grim. I checked the account connected to their payment plan. He said, "They're down to less than $2,000. There's no way they'll make the full payment." I didn't even flinch. "Then I guess Rivera Capital will soon be the sole owner," I said. Sam hesitated. "You sure about this, Elena? It's a big move. You don't have to—" "I know," I cut in gently. "But I've done everything for them, Sam, and they've shown me exactly how much that's worth." He didn't argue after that, just said he'd monitor the account and let me know the moment the payment bounced. I ended the call and sat at my desk, fingers tracing the edge of the printed notice of default I had prepared the night before. It was official, signed, and perfectly legal. All it needed now was a date. I slid it into a crisp white envelope, sealed it, and wrote 2 words on the front. For Victor. I could have mailed it. Could have emailed the legal notice through Rivera Capital and been done with it, but some things are better delivered in person. That afternoon, I got a text from my stepmother, Nancy. "Hi, sweetheart. We're having dinner Sunday night. Just family. It would mean a lot if you came." No emojis, no we miss you. No warmth, just enough sugar to coat the trap. I knew exactly what this was. They were about to ask me for something, and they still had no idea what I knew. I stared at the screen, then typed back. Me. Of course, looking forward to it. The show began. Sunday came quickly. The moment I pulled into their driveway, I felt the familiar knot twist in my stomach. The house looked just like it always had. Same stone porch, same peeling blue shutters. Only now it looked like a stage. One I was finally ready to walk across with a script of my own. Nancy opened the door with a forced smile. "Elena, we're so glad you could make it." I returned the smile with equal precision. "Thanks for having me." The table was set with more care than usual. Garlic bread, salad, roast chicken. Victor sat at the head of the table like always, arms crossed and voice flat. "Elena," he said, nodding. "Good to see you." "You too, Dad." We made it through the first 10 minutes of small talk. Zach bragging about his new gaming setup, Nancy asking me about Austin traffic, before Victor cut to the chase. "We've been thinking," he said, folding his hands like a politician, "about family, about legacy, about how important it is to support one another when things get tough. Here it comes." Nancy leaned forward. "The mortgage has been a little tight lately. Just temporary, of course. But we were wondering if you'd be willing to help." I raised an eyebrow. "How much are we talking?" Victor hesitated, just long enough to show it hurt his pride. $3,000 a month, he said. "Just for a few months, to help us catch up." I nearly laughed. I was already paying $5,800 a month to keep them in this house. They were asking me for more, still thinking I was just the responsible daughter with a decent paycheck. I set my fork down and folded my hands. "That's a lot of money," I said softly. "Let me think about it." Nancy looked relieved. Victor gave a short nod. I was so calm, so polite, they didn't suspect a thing. Later that night, I made a call. "Uncle Mateo?" I asked when he picked up. "Elena, everything okay?" I paused. Mateo and Victor hadn't spoken much in recent years, but he was the only person in the family who had ever made me feel like I mattered. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Has Dad been saying anything about me lately?" There was silence on the line, then a sigh. "Elena," he said, voice low. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you this. But yes, it's worse than you think." My chest tightened. "Worse? How?" "Victor's been telling people that you've been hiding money, that you're planning to cut them off. He's been bragging that if you don't give him more money willingly, he'll make you regret it." "What does that mean?" "He said something about reporting you to the IRS, making false complaints, getting you audited, even getting you fired." My stomach turned to ice. So that's what it was. Not just betrayal, not just ingratitude, premeditated sabotage. They weren't just using me. They were plotting against me. I didn't feel sad anymore. I didn't feel shocked. I felt focused. "Thank you, Mateo," I said. "You don't know how much I appreciate you telling me." "Whatever you need," he said. "I've got your back." I hung up and stared at the sealed envelope on my desk. 3 more days. 3 more days until the payment would bounce. 3 more days until everything changed. They had called me a failure. They had mocked me, manipulated me, planned to ruin me. But what they didn't know was that the house they lived in was already mine, and soon, so was the power to end everything they thought they controlled. Sunday came with sunshine and fake smiles. The Unity Brunch, as Nancy had called it in her text, was scheduled for 11 a.m. location, their backyard patio, decorated with streamers and folding chairs like a political fundraiser. Guests, a carefully curated mix of extended family, uncles, cousins, 2 of Victor's golf buddies, and of course, Zach, front and center, glowing like a trophy. Everyone was there except the truth. I arrived last, as planned. Holding a small envelope, in my hand labeled with one word, notice. Nancy greeted me first, arms outstretched like she hadn't plotted behind my back just days earlier. "Elena, we're so glad you made it. You look so professional," I smiled. "Thanks. Just came from a client meeting," which was a lie. But I figured that made us even. Victor stood under the pergola, drink in hand, wearing a linen shirt and smugness. He nodded at me, said nothing, and went back to pretending he wasn't on the verge of financial collapse. I sat down at the long table between my cousin Sophia and Uncle Mateo, who gave me a quiet glance that said, "You ready?" I nodded. We made it through 2 awkward toasts, one from Nancy about family values and one from Zach about himself, before Victor cleared his throat and stood. "If I may," he said, raising his glass. In times like these, when families can drift apart, I think it's important to recognize who really holds us together. So let's take a moment to appreciate the real leaders of this family, the ones who actually show promise. He turned to Zach and smiled. "My son, Zach, who's working on his business degree, who has ambition, and who, unlike some people," his eyes flicked briefly toward me, "never needed a handout to succeed." I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I stood. "Elena?" Nancy asked, clearly alarmed. "Everything okay?" "Couldn't be better," I said, holding up the envelope. "Actually, I'd like to make a little announcement of my own." Victor gave a lazy smirk. "Oh, you launching another spreadsheet?" I ignored him, stepped around the table, and stood where everyone could see me. I took a breath, then opened the envelope and unfolded the document inside. "This is a formal notice from Rivera Capital," I began, "regarding the property located at 1816 Elmwood Avenue." Now the room quieted. Effective immediately. Due to missed mortgage payments and the terms of the original agreement, full ownership of the property has been transferred to Rivera Capital, LLC. I looked up. In plain English, the mortgage is in default. The house is no longer yours. Silence. Sharp, immediate, almost surgical. Victor blinked. "What?" Nancy whispered. "What is she talking about?" Victor laughed awkwardly. "Okay, this is cute." "Elena, what is this? A prank?" I folded the paper. "You've been paying me rent for 6 years." His jaw tightened. "You mocked a failure," I said, "while living under her roof." Someone gasped. I think it was my cousin Daniel. Nancy's face drained of color. Zach dropped his fork. Victor took a step forward, all pretense gone. That's not true. You're lying. This is ridiculous. Mateo stood beside me. It's not ridiculous, Victor, he said. You signed every page of that mortgage contract, you just didn't read it. Stay out of this, Victor snapped. This is between me and my daughter. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, now I'm your daughter, Zach scoffed from the end of the table. So what? You're rich now and want us to bow down? This is why no one takes you seriously. You're just bitter. You've always been bitter. I smiled, calm as ever. Zach, I said, you might want to find a new place to store your gaming chair. This one comes with a rent invoice starting Monday. Laughter rippled across the table, from the cousins, from Mateo, from one of Victor's own friends who clearly wasn't in on the plan. Victor slammed his glass down on the table. You think this makes you powerful? You think you've won? I stepped closer. We were eye to eye now. I don't need to win. I just needed to stop losing. His face darkened. You'll regret this. I tilted my head. I already regret trying to be someone you'd respect. Nancy tried to interject. Elena, honey? No, I said, sharp but steady. You don't get to call me that anymore. I turned to the group, voice clear. For years, I paid your bills. I covered your mortgage. I showed up when no one else did. And you didn't just fail to say thank you. You made plans to destroy me when I stopped giving. I looked back at Victor. So now you'll learn what it's like to depend on someone who no longer owes you anything. He opened his mouth. I raised a hand. Don't. Save your breath. You'll need it to explain this to your lawyer. Then I walked back to my seat, my hands calm, my heart louder than ever. I sat down, took a sip of water, and smiled politely as the brunch collapsed into chaos around me. Checkmate. 3 days after the brunch, the legal process began. No yelling, no dramatic doorstep confrontations, just a formal notice to vacate delivered via certified mail, signed by Rivera Capital's legal counsel, and stamped with authority. Victor and Nancy were officially tenants now. And under Texas law, tenants who default on rent, especially tenants with no formal lease, are evicted. They had 30 days to leave. I didn't check in, didn't drive by, didn't respond to the barrage of texts that started with, "You'll regret this," and ended with, "We're family, Elena," because I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Sam handled the logistics. He confirmed with clinical precision that my father and stepmother packed up and left the night before the deadline, likely to avoid the embarrassment of being forcibly removed. They left the house relatively intact, but a few drawers were missing, furniture scraped, and the garage reeked of old oil. Petty. Predictable. I drove out to 1816 Elmwood one last time, not to see them, just to stand in the quiet. To feel what it was like to walk through that house without grief echoing off the walls. I wandered room by room, the hallway where my childhood drawings once hung, the kitchen where I learned how to make pancakes while Victor criticized the mess, the guest room where I spent most holidays because Zach had dibs on the bigger room. It felt smaller than I remembered, not just physically, emotionally, like all the weight it held no longer belonged to me. I stood in the empty living room, closed my eyes, and let it go. Then I sold the house. The market was hot, and within days, it was gone. The profits were solid, more than enough to do something meaningful. That's when I created the Rivera Foundation, a nonprofit fund dedicated to helping young women escape emotionally abusive, financially manipulative families. Women who, like me, had been gaslit into thinking that love was conditional, that being born meant owing someone everything. I launched the website quietly. No press, no big campaign. Just a blog post on Medium titled, "The Day I Evicted My Father and Reclaimed Myself." I told the truth, not to shame, not to destroy, but to show others that you can cut ties and still survive, that you can stop proving your worth and still be worthy. The post went viral in less than 48 hours. Thousands of comments, emails, shares. Some were angry, calling me ungrateful, spoiled, cold. But most were from people who had lived it, who had been the scapegoats, the black sheep, the invisible backbone of ungrateful families, and every message said the same thing. Thank you for putting into words what I've felt my whole life. It didn't make me proud. It made me certain I had made the right choice. 3 months passed, and then one afternoon, while I was reviewing a scholarship application for the foundation, a message popped up in my inbox. Sender, Nancy Rivera. Subject, please, Elena. I don't know where else to go. Please talk to us. We miss you. We didn't mean to hurt you. We just didn't know how to show it. Please. I read it once, then twice. My hand hovered over the keyboard for a long time. Old instincts kicked in, memories of being the peacemaker, the fixer, the good daughter. But that wasn't who I was anymore. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their love. I had myself. So I deleted the message, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing peace. I walked outside and sat on my porch, a cup of black coffee in hand. The air was warm, the sky clean, and my phone, blissfully quiet, no chaos, no manipulation, no pretending, just clarity. They had spent years telling me I was a mistake, but I had taken that mistake and turned it into something lasting. A home for someone else, a mission for people. Like me, a legacy that didn't need their approval. That's the thing about real family. It doesn't demand proof. It simply shows up. It respects you. It holds space for who you are, not who you're useful to be. Victor and Nancy were my blood, but they were never my home. I created that for myself, and for every girl still wondering. If she's worthy without permission, she is. You are. I am. Because they called me a mistake. I turned that mistake into a legacy. That's the difference between them and me.